So, Lana, first of all, you were congratulating me when we first came on when the sound was wonky, but I have seen all your support. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Well,
It's been quite the wild ride. And it's nice to see friendly faces come up in the feed and be like, go girl. I see you. I see what you're doing. It's really nice. So thank you.
thank you for being brave to tell your story and share it with the world. We need more of you out there.
Well, and we need more of you, which is why we are talking to you today. Very different stories. I think similar courage. Just in going back over your story, preparing for this interview, I was like, I understand now why I wanted her on the show. Because it was a while ago when we talked, and I write one word next to each prospective guest, and yours was infertility. And I'm like, but then I looked through my notes and did my research, and I'm like, yes, we need to share this story with our listeners. But before we do, I have a little question for you. So, true story, Scott and I were at a wedding. We cut out before they sliced the cake and went home to get in bed and watch Netflix.
I know exactly what
So
you're
my
talking
question for you is, if you leave a party or a wedding early, do you go to the happy couple or the hosts and say goodbye, or do you just duck out?
Well, I would say that's conditional. Depends if my husband's with me or not. If it's me, I
Okay.
would dart out. If it's my husband,
Yes.
he's a long goodbye type of guy who needs to say goodbye to everyone. So my personal preference is to do the Houdini.
Yes, the Houdini. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, that's what we do.
I like that answer. Do you tell the truth about why you're leaving early, or do you have a stock excuse?
I usually tell the truth if I'm
Yeah.
if I'm gonna at least make the effort. I'll go up and just give them the truth, because I figure if I'm close enough to be at their home, then I feel like I should be able to
Yes.
be close enough to be honest with them.
I like that. I like that. And sometimes you don't have to tell them everything. Just like, oh, hi, I'm leaving. It was beautiful. We'll talk later on in the week or whatever, instead of saying I'm going home to watch Netflix and eat ice cream,
Correct.
which is what we were doing.
We actually took
Explain-itis.
some dessert with us.
Yeah, explain-itis. Yeah, we did. We stole dessert because it wasn't they weren't serving it yet.
They had it taped off. They were holding everybody hostage, we felt like, for the dessert.
Yeah.
So we jumped the
Yes,
Well,
we
the
did.
boundary.
Now then, my question for you is, did you eat the dessert in the car, or did you wait till you were at home watching Netflix?
I don't think it made it to the
It
car. I think
definitely
we ate
didn't
it
make it to the car.
on the
Yeah.
way out. Yeah, it was actually pretty fun. We felt like we were like kids stealing drinks or something, like, from, well, I don't know. I don't know if we felt like that, but it felt kind of like that thrill, like of getting away with something. Thank you. Thank you for that, Lana. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins. This is the only one in the room, but I am never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co-host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun.
Can I say hi, hon?
Yes, say
Hi,
it.
Hun.
Say it.
Hi, Lana. Nice.
Lana, I have you. This is what I wrote for you. I know that you're a life coach and that you're the host of the podcast, So Now What, which is rediscovering life after failed IVF. But I also included activists in your bio because I feel like you are. I feel like you are calling attention to something that other people are dismissing, and you are making a case for why it needs to be seen and heard. And the people that have this in common need to be seen and heard as well. Do you think that fits for you, activists?
I do. And I guess I've thought of myself as an advocate, but activist seems so powerful. So thank you for offering that to me today. I love it.
Yeah. I went back and forth on it, and I'm like, no, this woman's an activist, so I'm putting it in. I'm going to read something from your site just to kind of kick us off. It says, I've put 2 paragraphs together here, so you'll know that, but probably other people won't. Hi, I'm Lana, or not hi, I'm Lana. I desperately tried to become a mom, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. I never would have believed it was possible to love my life without having the children I'd always dreamed would fill our home. The years that followed were full of loneliness, self-judgment, and confusion about living a childless life. There's more, but I want to just kind of start there and talk about the 7 years that you were trying to conceive, right? There were 7 years where you were actively trying to become a mom. And can you tell us what your life looked like at the beginning of those 7 years, right before you started?
I'd say I was very hopeful. I have a background working in the medical field, and I'd seen so many wonderful things happen to people that maybe didn't expect it. And I never thought that I would be the one that couldn't get pregnant, because I believe that the science would work for me, to be honest with you. So
Yeah.
when I first went to my first medical appointment, I just thought it was going to be a piece of cake, and I would take some medication and things would happen, and I'd have a baby within the next couple months, if not a year or so.
Yeah. And at that time, how old were you?
I was 37.
37. And so you had gotten married a couple years earlier?
Correct. Yeah, I was 35, and I was always very career and success driven, and I knew that I wanted to be a mom, but it was never something that I thought I had to plan for. I never had any issues that I thought would need medical attention related to reproduction. So I just assumed when my time came and I was ready to start having kids, it would just happen the way it should. And I say that in air quotes.
And no, I totally get that. Were all your friends starting to get married and have children around that age?
Majority, yes, were either already had children. I had a few that were going through IVF and going through treatments themselves. So seeing their success was helpful for me to feel like I was going on the right path, because it had worked for them. So I assumed it would work for me as well.
Right. And that used to be something really whispered about, right? Like going through IVF at all, because the idea is that that everything's easy. You know, the relationship's easy, getting married is easy, being married is easy, conceiving is easy, you know, pregnancy's easy, having the kids are easy. Like all this stuff it looks like it's easy the way that I saw it anyway, when I was in my late 20s. But IVF was something like I won't say in the entire Black community, but none of the Black people I knew were talking about IVF. And I would come to find out later that many of them had gone through it in order to conceive their children, but it just wasn't something that was discussed. This was a number of years ago, but did you find that it was more open when you were trying to conceive?
I would say it was open because I knew people going through it, but I come from an ethnic community that having children and big families was something that was expected of you. And
Yes.
I found myself feeling very isolated from my community because I didn't hear anyone else talk about it. So it wasn't everyday terminology for me. And I think that's where a lot of my shame stemmed from, because I didn't know other people that needed assistance having something I thought women were just supposed to be able to do.
Right. And you told me that you always thought that mom would be your identity. Did you feel like was there anything in your head that says I'm trying later than some of the other moms? Like, or no?
Not
I mean, because it's really not.
Yeah,
but
I would say maybe because I live in a big city. I live in Chicago. I have a successful career. I was always surrounded by people that were very focused more on career and goals based on that, where some of them were moms, but it was never really the center of conversation for me in my circle of people.
yeah, so it was just like, when I'm ready, I'll be a mom. And then you were ready. And then there was like, what was there like a period of time where it just wasn't happening naturally? So you're like, let's go get whatever we need to get so that we can get pregnant.
Interestingly, so at 35, I got married. At 37, I was on the phone. I remember it so vividly. I was in the grocery store in the cracker aisle, And I was on the phone with one of my girlfriends who had successfully had a child via IVF. And she said to me, are you and Jack thinking about having kids? And I said, yeah, we've been trying, but I wasn't, again, I've in hindsight, I was so lackadaisical about it. I just figured, it just didn't happen this month, but I wasn't doing basal temperatures or keeping track of anything. And so we were talking about that. And she said, I really would love for you, if you want to have a child, maybe go see a reproductive endocrinologist or at least talk to your OBGYN, because for her, she had lived my story. She waited a while to even start getting pregnant. So I feel like she was really the one that day in the cracker aisle that opened my eyes to seeking any professional help or just even getting a diagnosis of some sort. So that was really what moved me to go do that. And luckily I live in a city with great access to care, and saw my OBGYN, did some initial blood work and workup, and I was then diagnosed with something called unexplained infertility. So there from the onset, here's this word to define me and my future as a mom as something that's unexplained. So there started my 7 years of trying to become a mom.
I feel like that's not really a diagnosis if it's not explained, right? Like, is that what it's actually called? Unexplained?
Yes, it's called unexplained infertility, and it's commonly associated with somebody who doesn't have something like endometriosis, PCOS, any sort of...
What's PCOS?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. So some women have issues with having cysts, and then they can't around the ovaries, and then they can't seem to get pregnant. So it can be treated, but it's not always a guarantee that you can have children after that. And if there was surgery or something of that sort, that would be another reason that they could have an explanation for why you have infertility. But in my case, it was just advanced age. They call it advanced maternal age. So I believe that starts in your early 30s, that they already consider you an advanced maternal age patient.
That's so interesting to me. Yeah. I mean, I understand kind of the chronology of the biology, like, because we had babies, humans had babies much younger, in our teens originally, right? And we're married off, at a very early age, and probably by the time we were in our early 30s, we were done having kids, right? That was the end of it. And now we've progressed where we actually are partners and have careers and blah, blah, blah. And maybe a lot of people aren't looking to get married until after 30. But that's interesting to me that biologically it's advanced maternal age and early 30s.
It is. And I wasn't prepared for it. And then to hear the word unexplained, to be defining somebody who was so success driven and used to having everything in their life explained and sort of thought out, or at least mapped out. Yes. I think there was a component of that. Just those two words really set me off in this like tense moment that going into this journey, I was already this anomaly of a person. So
yeah. And then, so it's so interesting and obviously discouraging, right, to get that diagnosis. But did you, because I know that your journey was 7 years. When did you get the diagnosis of unexplained infertility? Was it the beginning of that journey?
It was, when they did the blood tests and they check your, different levels to see what your ovarian reserve is like, what the quality, egg quality, all those things play into that. So from the onset, I knew right away that I was going to need some assistance. So I did something called intrauterine insemination. So that's IUI. And that is basically where they hyperstimulate to see if they can create a lot of eggs for you. So you take these medications, and then you have a greater chance that one will fertilize. So that is done more naturally than in a lab. So they inject the sperm through a catheter into your uterus, and they hope that you naturally will then get pregnant. So we did 7 of those and didn't have success with that. And then that's when I went on to do the more invasive, which is in vitro fertilization.
Right. And that's an implantation. That's a retrieval and an implantation of the eggs. The retrieval of the unfertilized eggs, and then an implantation of fertilized eggs.
And the fertilization
right?
happens in a lab. So
Right.
they
Right.
monitor to see how the embryo is growing. They can test it before they implant it. If you choose to do that, that's certainly an option, an upcharge. And an option to see if the embryo is healthy and chromosomally normal before they implant it. So those are all there's a lot of, it's almost like you're going to the grocery store of all the upcharges of things that you can do to help at least try to be more successful. But in my case, I did all that and I spent all the money and I did all the upcharges I could, and it didn't work the way that I had planned it would.
I want to talk a little bit about the emotional toll. I want to talk about the financial toll too, but the emotional toll. Like, tell me about the emotional journey of starting with unexplained infertility and then ending 7 years later without becoming a mom.
Well, it was, I would say, a very isolating time because I had a lot of shame and embarrassment that I even needed help getting pregnant. So I didn't tell many people. I didn't talk about it to my manager in my workplace because I was worried that if they knew I was trying to get pregnant, I might be looked over for promotions, for advancement in my career. And then I think I also had this level of shame that they knew that I needed help because I was seemingly somebody that was such a powerhouse and so personally driven. And I carried a lot of embarrassment that people might know that I needed help because it was, to me, needing help at that point in my life was weakness. And I've, obviously changed so much throughout my journey of seeing how brave I was to actually even say yes to these treatments. But I would say that emotionally it was very hard. And also knowing that my husband, who wanted to be a dad, was at a risk of not being able to have children because of me and my body is the way that I saw it. And even though he was so supportive and never made me feel as though I was denying him of something, I would have these thoughts of, well, if he would have married someone else or if he would have tried having kids with somebody else, he could have had his dream, but I felt like I was robbing him of his dream in some sense as well. So I felt guilty, shameful, embarrassed, and really like helpless.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we talked a little bit about the beginning of how I connected to your story. And my story is different as far as being a mom and fertility, et cetera. But the asking for help when I was in the throes of my addiction, because I was this kind of powerhouse in this leadership position in my kids' school community, and because I was seen a certain way, I really felt like it was a failing, and I was so ashamed of coming forward and coming clean about what I needed that it really kept me ill for a long time. And one of my missions is to remove the shame around the stigma around addiction and recovery. And I know that your mission is to remove the stigma and call attention to what's not being done in this area. And it's like I said, it's just one of the things I really connected with. I wanted to talk about the financial toll because I think people are still shocked to learn like how much this stuff costs. And I want to ask you how much it costs, and you can reveal as much as you want about the personal costs, but also like what you think about how much it costs. Do you think it should cost that much? Like, I know that we have a friend who lives in England, and she went through IVF and everything was covered there. it's different. They pay more taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts about your own journey financially and then what you think about it.
Well, it depends on what state you live in, and things might have changed. So I don't want to necessarily quote what states, but I live in Illinois. And when we first started IVF, we tried going through my insurance for my employer. So my employer at the time was based out of Massachusetts, and there was no coverage available in the state of Massachusetts, which did not qualify me for assistance through my insurance. So I had a lifetime max of $10,500 for infertility treatments, which is like a joke because that's literally 2 weeks of medication when you're actually going through. So what we did, my husband's self-employed, and what we did is we went on a healthcare plan because his business is in Illinois. We paid out of pocket to do an independent healthcare plan so that way I could get 4 rounds of IVF covered, because in the state of Illinois it was covered. So we utilized that. So right there, anyone who's ever been independently seeking insurance, it's extremely expensive, but we did the calculation of paying out of pocket versus having it covered. So that was initially a huge expense for us. And as far as access to people having care, I think it's so important. And I think it's a shame that more employers don't automatically offer that to their employees. And I don't know if they realize how much of an impact it creates on their employees, whether it's the female or the male, or if you're, depending on where you are in your relationship. I know several women who even go through IVF alone, and they know that they want to be moms, and they're not looking for a spouse or a partner to go through it with. So there's a lot of exclusions, I think, on plans. And I think it's a tough question as far as cost. I certainly would love everyone to have access, but just like anything in life, the more premium something is, and in this case, it's the lab, and it's the embryologist, and it's the level of study and the healthcare providers, the better the lab, the more expensive it is. And I was willing to pay that because I wanted to have the best care. And do I want everyone to have that access to care? Yes, I do. And I think we all deserve it. But there's also, I think, this mindset that if you pay more, you should get more. And I was an example of, even though I went to the best lab and the best place for my treatment, both in Chicago, and then I later went to Colorado to the top, what I knew at the time was the top place in the world to go for fertility treatments. Even though I paid a premium and did so much of the extra add-ons, it still didn't work the way that I had hoped. So there's just no guarantees. And I would say we probably spent maybe $200,000 out of pocket, if I had to say cumulatively.
Yeah.
Even with my insurance going on my husband creating this plan in Illinois. But then we also, in Colorado, we knew going to Colorado to this clinic that our insurance wouldn't be covered at all. So we went into that knowing that that would be out of pocket.
Yeah. Wow. So you both really did everything you could.
We did.
To make this happen.
Including Reiki, including acupuncture. I would massage, like all the holistic things that I was doing. I feel like I really tried everything. I remember laying on this energy mat that was supposed to help, bring more energy to my uterus. I would have a heating pad to help warm up my uterus. I had the greatest Chinese medicine doctor in Chinatown in Chicago, and he didn't speak English really well, but he used to write like hearts with smiley faces on the days that we should be having intercourse. I literally tried every method and every resource that I could find to try to be a mom.
How much space did this take up in your life and your head during those 7 years? Because I'm picturing you just doing this, but I know that you also went to work you were probably also a friend still to your friends, and you were still social. But how much do you, because I know this is, you told me that you would do it all over again. And so I'm just wondering, like, what it, not emotionally, but like what it cost you time wise, and why would you do it all over again?
Well, I'll answer the time-wise answer first. It took a lot of time, and I also think I said no to a lot of things because I wasn't sure where I would be in my journey. So vacations, girls' trips, family things going on. I never wanted to say yes and commit to something because I didn't know where I would be, either in the middle of a cycle, maybe I'd be pregnant at the time. There was just, I felt like my life was on hold for 7 years while we were just figuring out the next path. And I didn't do back-to-back treatments within those 7 years. I did take some time to like recognize, like, is this even what I want to do anymore? I try to really give myself the space to make decisions from a place of not being an overachiever, because I think a lot of that played into it too, because I was like, if I push harder, this, might be this one more time. So those 7 years, I would say, were not full of much growth and personal ability to really enjoy life because I was so focused on my end goal of motherhood. And then the other question you asked me about doing it over again, I know people think that's so strange to hear me say that, but even though I didn't have the children I always dreamed of, I've grown so much personally, and the ability that I've had to discover who I am as Lana Manikowski to the core has been such a gift for me, that even though the road to getting there was something that most people couldn't fathom wanting to ever do, knowing what I went through, but I just feel that the outcome of knowing myself and knowing what I'm capable of and being able to look at myself in the eyes and love who I am again, despite being so disappointed by judgment of myself and anger towards my body and this healthcare system and all the things that I blamed on, I just have been able to let go of that and really love who I am and know that my life is not based on having a child, isn't what defines me, that there's so much more inside of us. And I just feel so grateful for that.
I love that answer. Thank you for that. I just want to ask this because I know the listeners will want to know. We talked briefly, you and I, about adoption or using an egg donor, and you said those weren't the right fit for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And it's, I think that's something that a lot of women who went through IVF or weren't able to become moms get asked. A lot of people, when you tell them that you don't have children, and they say, oh, the first thing is, oh, I'm so sorry. You can always adopt. And I've done a lot of work on myself with handling that answer, those words from people, because for me, we looked at egg donor and we decided if it wasn't genetically going to be both part of my husband and part of me, that we would, we're going to pass on that. But the adoption thing we looked into, and we looked at doing international adoption and a couple other options, but ultimately there was a couple things. We weren't sure exactly genetically, like, were we going to get the right answers about what the child had endured and what the prenatal care was like, what the family history was like. And so there was a lot of judgment. I think that, at least speaking on my behalf, I had a lot of judgment for myself that I wasn't a good person, that would be more important to me than providing a home to a child. And there's a lot of people who still offer me a lot of words of judgment that those things were more important to me than raising a child that wasn't mine, that came to me through adoption. But there was another part of me that felt very victimized because I was scared that what if I was that person on the movie that you see at the airport with the baby, with the bassinet, or, everything set up at their home. They had the car seat ready to go, and then they get told 20 minutes before the baby's supposed to come into their arms, and that it's not going to be their child. And so there was a part of me that was so scared to go through that heartache after having gone through 7 years of heartache that I felt very weak for admitting that I was scared and that I was worried about how I could handle another like letdown in my life in relation to becoming a mom. So those are kind of the two things that are very prominent to me. And I try to talk a lot about those things in my community because I think there's a lot of women that are embarrassed to say that they're not sure adoption's right for them because society tells them there's these kids, they need a home, and because you can't have your own, it's your duty to provide children to, or provide a home to these children. And I think it's a beautiful option, and I would never talk anyone out of it. It just wasn't the right decision for us.
Wow, I've never heard anybody put it quite that way. And I have a friend who made the same decision, but I don't know that she was able to articulate it that way. I will be sharing this episode with her.
Thank you.
So thank you also for that.
It's been a lot of life coaching to get me there, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
And really understanding when someone told me you can always adopt, what I was making those words mean about me. And when I got those words from somebody, just asking myself, okay, why is that a problem that they're saying that to you? And realizing that someone's probably just wanting to offer you compassion. And I've really felt violated instead of loved by somebody's words, offering me those words. So I really try to talk about it because I think a lot of women suffer from a lot of guilt for not adopting.
What do you say back to them?
I tell them
when they say
I
that?
usually will say, "Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you." Depending on what the relationship is like or how well I know the person, I usually just tell them, "Oh, thank you so much. That's so nice of you to offer that." And then they just maybe realize that it's an uncomfortable circumstance maybe for them to be in. But yeah.
Yes.
But then there's sometimes where, I would say I want people to know that it doesn't bother me anymore that they say that, but just to know that adoption's not only for the people adopting, but for that child. Like, it's just not like, let's go to the grocery store and pick out a kid.
Right.
Those children deserve to end up in a home with somebody who is ready to receive and love them the way that they deserve to be loved. And so just to offer adoption up as this answer to my emotional suffering, I don't think it's fair to the child either.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think that if one looks, you'll see lots of stories about people who weren't ready or did it for the wrong reasons. And you're right, these are actual human beings, little human beings that need to be considered when bringing them into a home. So when you and I talked before, we were talking about the grief of that, and we're going to pull out of that in a minute and talk about where you are now and what you're doing and how you're helping people. But grief can be really difficult on a relationship. And so I'm imagining that you and your husband were both grieving. Then do you think that it challenged you, or that it brought you closer together, that it strained the relationship or brought you, or both?
I would say that during our years of finding out that we weren't going to become parents was more scary than the years that we were actually going through it. I think because there was always this hope that we'd have this outcome. And again, I'm speaking, from my perspective here. When we found out that we couldn't become parents, I remember thinking, is this what my everyday is going to be like? And even though we had, financial resources and loved to travel and great families and friends, life just felt so empty because we would come home and the biggest thing that we'd have to talk about was what was going on in our day, maybe what are we having for dinner. And we had this beautiful home, and I remember just feeling so lonely and disconnected from my husband because I just felt like there was nothing else for us to really do, and we didn't have this enjoyment of each other's company. And I don't know if that was lost throughout the way, or did we think that having children is what brings you together as you start to age? So I think it was really a need to reconnect with why it was that we chose one another as our partners. And of course, there might have been a portion of us back when I was 35 that I was like, oh, he'd be a great dad. There's also, there was probably that consideration that I had of, oh, he'd be an awesome dad. But if we're not going to have that, how can I move forward in this relationship and still feel connected to this person that I felt so much love for, and not feel like I was going to be bored forever? And so I think initially we didn't necessarily fight. We were just sort of mundane, and we didn't really interact much. We were just sort of on autopilot. And we decided to really make an effort. And a lot of this came after I started working with a coach for myself. And that's why I'm so pro working either with a therapist or a coach, or many people work with both. And I think it's so important, because I decided that I wanted to figure out a way to make this work, that it was like fun and exciting. And if we didn't have children holding us down, why were we not enjoying life and doing the things that, seem so fun and exciting to do if you don't have little ones to come home to? And so we decided to make an effort in that part of our relationship and have date nights, even though every night we didn't need to escape from anyone or go anywhere, but find, like, Tuesday nights are yoga night. We go to yoga on Tuesdays, and then we have season tickets to the symphony, and, we would find reasons to have date nights and do things together and start to experience life instead of just coming home and being basically bored with one another.
Yes.
So.
I love that. I mean, Scott and I, where we are now in our lives, like, and this is no shade on anybody who has little kids, God bless you, but we're so happy that we don't. Like, we're really enjoying our lives, and it was to be untethered like that, to be able to impulsively go to the movies, to be able to take a vacation without much consideration for how it might impact people, to really just, or just lie in bed all morning on Sunday, just the two of us. It's so much fun. Like, we have so much fun with it. So I really support and enjoy the fact that you guys are embracing that you two are embracing that.
It seems like it felt like it should have been so much easier to discover, but it does take effort. And I think I talk about that a lot with my students. That you have to actually schedule this time in, because when you don't, sometimes an excess of time, you just think there's always going to be more of it. So you don't ever really go and try to create anything from it. So that's where I'm at with it.
You and I talked about, I want to talk about you're becoming a coach, and so now what, and how you're helping people. But I just wanted to touch on paid time off for miscarriages and IVF, because you and I talked about that, and it was like I had never even thought about that before. Tell me, do you remember saying that to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very vocal about it.
Talk to me a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's a disservice that there isn't leave for women going through IVF. So there's maternity leave. A lot of places are including paternity leave, which, I think is an important part of the equation as well. But what about the woman who just, miscarried last night and she's got to take her paid time off? Or when we were going to Colorado and we had to go for 10 days at a time and get on a flight, and we didn't exactly know what day we needed to leave and come back. And I had to take vacation time for that. And so in my corporate workplace, I'm very vocal about building some more awareness around the needs of women who are in family planning or postpartum issues or prepartum issues. But so I think it's very important that if you are somebody listening and you're going through this, to talk about it with your HR department, because they might not know. And the more voices that they hear that this is an important part of their career and their work their work-life balance. Honestly, I hate to even call it a balance because it's not, but it's something that's so needed. But we need to be more vocal as employees and talk about our needs.
Yes, yes. Hear, hear. I actually first heard about that through the Expectful app. Have you ever
I haven't.
checked out
No.
that app? It's an app for people who are expecting and are either postpartum or prenatal or whatever. But it's also an app. There's a component of the app for people who are going through infertility treatments and people who have where they haven't been successful. And so it's just like little memes, and they put things up. And one was paid leave, paid time off for IVF. I didn't hear miscarriages, but for IVF, and I was like, huh. And then you said it, and I was like, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to. This is something else that needs a voice. So tell me about becoming a coach, a life coach. Is that what you call it? It's a life coach, right?
Yes.
And tell me who you coach and what the business looks like and why that's so important to you.
So life coaching is something that, frankly, I had heard of, but I didn't really have a strong understanding of what it was. And I would always think it was somebody with this clipboard that would be like, okay, well, you need to try X, Y, and Z. And then if that doesn't work, come back to me and let me know. So when I finished my fertility treatments, I had gained a lot of weight from the medications and all the hormones, And I was walking around with all this excess weight on my body and already not loving my body because it didn't do what it was supposed to do. And I found this woman who was a weight loss coach. And she never called herself a life coach, but whatever it was, I started listening to her podcast, and she just so resonated with me. I joined her membership, and she was the first person that ever offered me the thought that I could believe something different about myself and my story. And it was just this novel thing. And I was like, what does this have to do with weight loss? But that's a whole nother story. But long story short, she was a certified life coach. And frankly, if I knew that, I probably wouldn't have joined her membership. But I took into consideration some of these tools that she offered me around why I was eating, and started to put them in place for what I was believing about myself as somebody who was infertile and somebody who couldn't have children. And it just opened up this like light in my mind that there's so many women who probably need this, because I'm such a resourceful person that if somebody like this existed in the world, I would have probably found them during my journey. And because I didn't, I decided that I needed to figure out a way to become a certified coach and create a community for women like me who wanted to become moms and couldn't. So I signed up for my life coach certification. It was a year-long program. And I started my program in 2021 and finished a year later by the time I finished all my practicum hours. And I started a podcast, and that was really the first place that I started telling my story. And I wasn't even certified at the time, but I just started talking about my story. And then as my podcast grew, more women started reaching out and finding me on social media and saying, my gosh, I've never heard anyone tell the story like you do. I thought I was the only one who felt that way.
Yes.
And that's why your podcast really resonates with me too, because there's so many of us that don't hear that somebody else like us exists. So we continue to sit alone and judge ourselves. And now that I'm a certified life coach, I have a community that is, I have a mastermind that's a small group of women. We come together weekly, and a lot of women are searching for community of other women that they can share their stories with. So majority of my students go through my mastermind. It's a 12-week mastermind. And then I also do one-on-one for women that maybe aren't ready for that community building yet, or they've gone through the mastermind and they want to work on some more specific things that are unique to their circumstance. And most excitedly, I created something called the Others Day. and I celebrate.
Yes, I love it.
Yes, so we're in the trademarking stage right now. Everything's in the process of getting approved. But I'm having the Others Day brunch. This is my second year doing it, and it's the day before Mother's Day. And it's geared towards women who either aren't moms or they didn't ever have a mother figure in their life, or they're feeling some sort of loss around Mother's Day. Maybe they lost their mom and they're no longer here. So the Others Day brunch is happening this year. It's going to be my second annual one. And I've got people flying in from Puerto Rico, Nebraska, Alabama. I mean, I'm just overjoyed by how many women have really felt called to seek connection and actually create connection. Because it's one thing to want something, but to actually take action to bring something into for you and that you emotionally are seeking, I think just speaks volumes. So I'm super excited about the Others Day brunch this year.
That is brilliant.
Thanks.
It's so brilliant. I mean, I just can't tell you. I had my kids had a classmate who lost his mom when they were in second grade or first grade. And she was a teacher at the school. She was really beloved, and she passed during the year, right before Mother's Day. And there was this huge, everybody made something for their mom in class, and blah blah blah. And I went to the powers that be and said, we cannot do Mother's Day. We have to make it something else. Let's just make it some kind of family day or something, because it was just too painful. And then each year I was kind of like, but hey, it doesn't need to be because of that. There are other people, and you made an Others Day. That's because there are just so many different types of families.
Yes.
You and your husband are a family, and the people who didn't have moms in their lives or dads in their lives are still part of a family. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it.
I feel
Yeah.
so grateful to create connection for people. And the event last year, it just came together so beautifully. And there's so many people that came last year that are coming again this year. And that's just proof that this is something that women need. Because when you walk through the Target aisles and you see the Mother's Day banners and you're like, it's just, I know that feeling. And so I wanted people to feel connected.
Yes. Wow. Fantastic.
Thanks.
I had a follow-up question, but your Others Day just blew it right out of my head. So that was perfect. It wasn't a question, it was a comment. I was going to say you became what you sought, because you sought that woman who had a podcast and then ended up being a life coach, and now you created a podcast, and then people come and find you, and then they can join your community and you can coach them. So that was there for you, and now you're there. Now you're that for others.
So is that an activist?
Which is really lovely. Yes. Oh, yes. Especially the Others Day. That is activism at its best.
Well, I'll always think of
Very
you when I
excited
start to
about that.
reference
Yes.
myself as an activist. I'll give you
Please
credit
do.
forever.
Please do. Gosh, Lana, thank you so much. Tell everybody where they can find you. And start with that. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, on Instagram, I'm at Lana, Lana Manikowski, Manikowski. My podcast, you have to search actually 5 words. It's the So Now What podcast is the formal name of it. And then I have my website, lanamanikowski.com. And I just started a YouTube channel. I'm new to YouTube, so I'm just doing that. So it's Lana Manikowski on YouTube as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Great. And you already said that your second annual Others Day brunch is coming up. So that might be what's next for you.
Correct. Yep. And that's on May 13th. I'm always going to do it the Saturday before Mother's Day. So if you're hearing this
Gorgeous.
after May 13th, put it on your calendar for next year.
For the following year. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to you and your bravery of telling your story, because it's so needed.
I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Lana Manikowski, and I'm the only one in the room who always thought she'd be a mom.